Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to MonsterLab. Today, I'm making a gorgeous blue snake on the hunt. I'll be crafting it out of clay, along with some rocks and little branches I picked up by the roadside. I started with a wooden base and a small branch. At first, I planned to lay the branch flat, but I realized it was too low to place the snake on top, so I decided to stand it upright to give it more height. The bottom wasn't stable yet, and that's where the rocks came in handy. I placed a rock under the branch to fill the gap between the wood base and the branch itself. Once everything looked good, I used super glue and a bit of cotton to secure the contact points. When cotton mixes with glue, it hardens into a really strong bond. After finishing the base, I wrapped some wire around the branch to shape the snake. It looks pretty simple, but the tricky part is bending the wire smoothly around those curves. Trust me, you don't want your snake looking all stiff and broken. The next step is to wrap the wire with aluminum foil and a bit of masking tape. This makes the structure stronger and also saves me some clay. He's looking pretty solid now, so it's time to start adding clay and sculpting. I started adding clay from the tail up, and as you can see, I used small pieces of clay and layered them evenly around the body. This way I can control the thickness so it's not too thin or too thick. I tried to record everything for you guys, but unfortunately, some parts of the footage didn't work out, so I couldn't show you the whole process, which is a shame. The snake I'm sculpting is called the blue insularis pit viper, or Trimeresurus insularis. It has a striking bright blue or turquoise color and is extremely rare in the wild. With its triangular head, slit pupils, and those heat-sensing pits between the eyes and nostrils, it's built to be a perfect hunter. Beautiful, but also deadly. After smoothing out the surface of the snake, I started carving in the details of the scales. The scales on the head are more defined. They're smoother compared to the body scales, which helps mark out the eye area and the heat pits. Around the nose and those heat-sensing pits, the scales are much smaller and tighter, giving the snake extra sensitivity to temperature and scent. Right above the eyes, there are one or two large scales that almost look like eyebrows. They act like a shield for the eyes, and they give the snake that intense, fierce expression you usually see in pit vipers. For the body scales, I used a tool with a sharp, triangular tip, and my job was to press around evenly so the pattern wouldn't get crooked. Now, if we're talking about realism, this type of scale doesn't really match a real snake. It actually looks more like gecko scales. But honestly, that's fine by me. I don't think it's a big issue, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Making these scales took a lot of time and patience. I had to redo parts a few times because I didn't pay enough attention to the staggered alignment of the scales. That was a bit frustrating, but also kind of fun because now I've learned something new that'll definitely help me in future projects. After finishing the body scales, I moved on to the belly scales. I'll be honest, I rushed this part a little, so it didn't turn out as clean as I wanted. At first, I was about to call it done and move on to baking and painting, but then I realized I completely forgot to give this snake a tongue. So I went back and added a short little tongue, and instantly he looked so much better. Once everything was done, I used alcohol and a brush to clean the whole model. That helped remove fingerprints and any leftover clay dust. And finally, he was ready to go into the oven. After baking, the snake was nice and solid, and now I could finally hold him and start painting. But before painting, I had to figure out how to cover up the tree branch because I only wanted to paint the snake. I didn't want to mess up the natural look of the wood. So I used masking tape to wrap around the smaller spots, and for the bigger areas, I used tissue paper held in place with tape. The tricky part was the spots where the snake and the branch meet. If I covered them too loosely, the paint would get blocked or overspray in the wrong way. So I had to take my time and cover everything really carefully. I also wrapped up the base separately so I could paint it later. Maybe it wasn't totally necessary, but I just wanted to make sure everything was as clean as possible. After spraying on a white primer coat, I started painting the main colors of the snake. The dominant colors of this species are turquoise blue or teal. Fun fact, not all Trimeresurus insularis are blue. Some are actually green or even yellow, and the pure blue ones are extremely rare. So I began with a base coat of turquoise blue applied evenly across the surface using an airbrush. Then I added a very thin wash of black paint to bring out the scale details. I brushed it on and quickly wiped it off with a tissue so the dark color stayed only in the cracks and didn't cover the scales themselves. Once I was happy with the scales, I used the airbrush again to spray a darker shade of blue along the back. If you've seen pictures of this snake, you'll notice the top of its body is usually a deeper blue, which gradually fades into lighter shades along the sides. I tried to capture that gradient as realistically as possible. After finishing the paint job, it was time to remove all the masking and check the result before painting the eyes. And honestly, I was pretty happy with it. Even though there were a few areas I wasn't completely satisfied with, it still looked great overall. Now, the eyes of this snake are something special. They have vertical pupils with a golden outline. And here's a cool detail you might not know. When the light hits just right, the eyes of a blue insularis pit viper shimmer with a golden glow, making its gaze look both mesmerizing and dangerous, almost like a warning light glowing in the jungle. After finishing the paint job, I thought I was done. But honestly, I wasn't fully satisfied yet, so I decided to try something more exciting, pouring resin into the base to make it look like water. I'd never tried this before, but I thought, hey, it should be fine. Before pouring the resin, I wanted to add a little more detail to the base. First, I painted it black. Then I used some forest roots I had bought earlier for my chameleon terrarium project. I cut them into small pieces and connected them between the branch and the base. The idea was to make it look like the snake was resting on a branch in a flooded jungle. Once everything was decorated, I started prepping for the resin pour. I used acrylic sheets and hot glue to build a mold around the base, hoping there wouldn't be any leaks. Next, I mixed the resin. I bought this 2-part resin from a local store and they claimed it was crystal clear and self-degassing. I really hoped it would work just like they advertised. I carefully measured the ratio with a scale and added just a tiny bit of blue pigment to make it look like river water. Then came the big moment. I poured the resin in and waited. But it failed. There was a leak and a lot of resin spilled out. It made the mold impossible to remove cleanly and I had to cover it up. The final piece didn't turn out the way I had imagined. But that's okay. I'll take this as a lesson learned and I'll be more careful in my future projects. So let's take a look at the final result. Thanks so much for sticking with me until the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.